South China Morning Post, 28th of September 2022. The Philippines also tries to eat its cake by wooing the US and China. China tricked the Philippines when Duarte was in charge. However, Chinese money is too tempting, and Marcos is trying to get money from China and the United States. But China is dangerous, and the Philippines could get hurt anytime. Philippine Defense Secretary Jose Faustino Jr. and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd will meet in Hawaii this week. Even though this seems normal, it is part of the dangerous game that Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is playing. He may be unable to have his cake and eat it, too, as he tries to keep good relations with China and the U.S. Marcos wants the U.S. to protect the Philippines' security and keep critical economic ties with China, which is the Philippines' most significant trading partner and with which the two countries' trade hit almost $50 billion in 2019. China is also the principal place where foreign money comes into the Philippines. Marcos has promised to improve relations with China, probably because he knows, like Rodrigo Duterte, that China will always be there. The trouble is that the Philippines needs to do something in exchange for U.S. security. As part of its plan to counter China's regional power, the U.S. wants to put its armed forces in the Philippines. It will be hard for Manila to keep good ties with both countries without putting at risk the benefits it gets from each. Marcos was one of the few world leaders who met with Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, outside the UN General Assembly. Biden also met with the leaders of Japan, South Korea, France, and Britain. Marcos was definitely in this small group because the US needs the Philippines as much as, or even more than, the Philippines needs the US. China has updated its military to the point where there is fear that it could beat U.S. forces in the South China Sea before reinforcements from bases outside the area could come. China's neighbors and rival claims in the South China Sea can't do anything about China's actions in their legally exclusive economic zones. They need help from the U.S. to stop China. If the U.S. doesn't do this, Southeast Asian countries will doubt the U.S.'s ability to keep the area safe and might try to make deals with Beijing. The U.S. must put its airplanes, warships, and missiles in the area to make claimants feel safer. It needs places to stay for this, and the Philippines is the most likely one. If Duterte hadn't stopped the implementation of the U.S.-Philippines Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, the U.S. would be able to put people and defense weapons in the Philippines under its control. This could include intermediate-range missiles. But if the Philippines gave the U.S. this kind of access, China could take economic action in response. On the other hand, Marcos should remember that when China and the Philippines were fighting over Scarborough Shoal in 2012, the U.S. did not send armed help. If the Philippines doesn't cooperate, this could happen again. During their meeting at the General Assembly, Biden told Marcos, "We've had some rough times, but from our point of view, this is a significant relationship. I hope you agree with me." The US and China often use their economic power as a political tool. After South Korea launched an American missile defense system in 2017, it stopped Chinese tourists from going there. During the Scarborough Shoal dispute, China stopped trips to the Philippines and stopped bananas from the Philippines from coming into China. And if fighting broke out, any US military bases in the Philippines could be attacked by China. Before he met Biden, Marcos said, "The role of the United States in keeping peace in our region is something that all the countries in our region, and the Philippines in particular, appreciate." Biden replied again that the U.S. would absolutely defend the Philippines. The two talked about the situation in the South China Sea and said they supported free navigation and overflight and the peaceful settlement of disagreements. Still, the U.S. mixes up freedom of economic navigation with the freedom of its military to spy on China's defenses and threaten them. China doesn't mind when military ships pass through the South China Sea. but it does object to military actions in its exclusive economic zone that it thinks go against its rights. But this barely veiled talk about how bad China is just the tip of the iceberg. Early in September, when tensions between China and the U.S. were high over Taiwan, Manila's ambassador to the U.S., José Manuel Romualdez, said that if there were a conflict over Taiwan, the Philippines would let U.S. troops use its military bases if it is important for us, for our own security. Carlisle Thayer, a security expert from Australia, says it's hard to imagine the Philippines saying no to a U.S. request to use military ports and airfields. Subic Bay and Clark Airfield would be at the top of the list, followed by the 5 military sites covered by the EDCA and other smaller facilities spread around the Philippines that have not yet been named. Romualdez said the construction work to improve these places should be done in the next 3 years. China had to look twice at all of this. Wang Wenbin, China's foreign ministry spokesman, said, "There have been no problems with freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. According to international law, China always accepts and backs the right of all countries in the South China Sea to freely sail and fly over it. China will continue properly handling maritime disputes with countries directly involved, like the Philippines, through dialogue and consultation, and will work with ASEAN countries to keep peace and security in the South China Sea. We hope that countries outside the region will accept the efforts of countries in the area to maintain calm and stability in the South China Sea." This is another shot in the war between the US and China over the Philippines worsening. Marcos wants them to compete by giving carrots, but they may also start to wave sticks around or even use them. Marcos is putting the Philippines in danger by the way he acts. This will only work until war breaks out. Just look at how quickly Japan took over the islands in the first island chain during World War II. The Philippines is very vulnerable.